In 1880, a 27-year-old Dutchman walked 70 kilometers through the Belgian countryside to visit an artist whom he admired. But when he arrived, he didn't knock at the door, he was too shy, and so he turned around and walked home. That man was Vincent van Gogh, and at 27, he'd already failed at being a bookseller, an art dealer, and a preacher. He had no formal training, no connections, and no real skill with a brush. What he did have, the only thing he had, was a set of habits. You see, he studied and copied prints obsessively, drawing manuals cover to cover. He sketched miners and their families by candlelight, and he named what he saw, attended to the details that others missed, memorized forms and proportions, and expressed what he felt. Eventually, he would tell stories in color that would be remembered for generations. Your foundation student is building the same kind of habits. Not painting habits, but thinking habits. And this week, week 18, is full of them. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Start with naming. That's the first core habit of grammar. Knowing the right word for the right thing. You see, your student isn't just reciting a sentence, they're learning to name the law of physics, Newton's third law. That phrase becomes a tool that they carry forward. But naming's only the beginning. You see, the second habit is attending. Notice how this idea is different from what they already know. Newton's first law of motion was about how objects stay put unless something moves them. The third law is different, and that's because it's about partnership. Think about a rocket. When a rocket is pushed up into the air, you can see the gas that's pushing the rocket moving down below it. And so there's an equalness between the amount of pressure and weight and force being pressed down out of this rocket compared to the amount of energy it takes to push the rocket upward. That's the equal and the opposite reaction. And you see, your student is learning to attend to this idea of inertia versus interaction. Now, here's where it gets particularly interesting. In challenge 1, students will discover that exponents and roots work in essentially the same way. They are inverse operations, mathematical partnership. Squaring a number and taking the square root of a number are both actions and reactions. They undo one another. And so you'll see Newton's third law isn't just a science fact, it's a pattern that shows up everywhere. The area of a triangle equals 1/2 base times height. Here's a formula that your student is memorizing. And the third core habit is memory. Now, memorizing isn't just repetition. It's building the knowledge base that future thinking depends on. Think about what's hidden inside of this formula. The 1/2 is because the triangle is exactly 1/2 of a rectangle with the same dimensions. Your student is memorizing a relationship, base and height inside of a shape. Change one measurement and you change everything about it. Challenge 1 students will discover that the word radical comes from the Latin word radix, meaning root. And so the source of something, let's say you square a number, the answer comes from the root. Mathematical relationships sure run deep, and they start with formulas like these. So take this idea and think about how it applies in other areas of study. The 5 cases of nouns: subject, direct object, indirect object, object of the preposition, and possessive. This is naming in its purest form, and your student is learning that nouns don't just exist, they have jobs. The same word can be a subject in one sentence and an object in another. Naming those jobs gives students a vocabulary for how language actually works. And that vocabulary matters enormously in Latin, where the functions are marked by the endings: nominative, accusative, dative, ablative, genitive. All different jobs, all different endings, and they mean different things. So let me throw a wrench in this right here. In challenge 1, your student will discover infinitives, verb forms, a noun that can be a verb. So think for a moment. To learn Latin is a noble goal. You see, in that sentence, to learn Latin, I'm using the verb as a subject. And so the 5 cases will start to stretch and expand into new territory as your student learns, and that all starts with attending to the names. In 1945, after the League of Nations failed to prevent World War II, American President Roosevelt, British Prime Minister Churchill, and Soviet Premier Stalin began the United Nations. Here we have some storytelling, our fifth habit of grammar. Your student doesn't just memorize the date or the names, they tell a story, they sing a song. You see, they're learning in the middle of this ongoing chapter in our history. And while they will learn the league failed, a war engulfed the world, 3 leaders tried something new. And this is a narrative structure. You see cause, crisis, response. It's all part of the skill. And your student is being dropped into the middle of it. They don't know the rest, and that's okay. We're getting there, and that's why we're teaching now. Storytelling leads to harder questions. Challenge 1 students will read about Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. They'll ask what was happening in the world in 1963. What were the results? What was the impact? They'll learn about the speeches like UN Charter attempts to shape history through words. Meanwhile, Challenge 2 students will explore Gresham's Law. What happened when precious metal was removed from American coins in 1965? They'll discover the economic consequences and the political ones. You see, all of this grows and builds from story. In Challenge 4, they'll read Mere Christianity from a very famous author who I'm sure you know. C.S. Lewis here argues that all humans share basic moral sense, the very idea underneath the UN's Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The history sentences that your student memorized this week is a thread they will stretch and pull far through the economic, rhetoric, and moral philosophy that they study in the 19th century, the 20th century, and the 21st. Finally, I'd like to return. Your student is studying Vincent van Gogh this week, and there's a reason that I started with his story. Van Gogh didn't begin painting until he was 27. He was largely self-taught, copying prints and studying manuals the way that your foundation students copies maps and memorizes definitions. He believed that before you could work with color, you needed to master black and white. Before composition, you need perspective. Before beauty, you need grammar. The painting your student will be studying is the bedroom in Arles. It tells its own story. In 1888, Van Gogh moved to the south of France and rented a small yellow room. He had a dream, a studio where artists could live and work and prosper. He prepared a guest room for Paul Gauguin and, while waiting, painted his own bedroom. You see, he wrote to his brother Theo that the color had to do the work, that looking at the painting should rest the imagination. Look at the painting carefully. No shadows. The perspective is slightly off. The room was actually trapezoidal, not rectagonal. The colors are bold, flat, inspired by Japanese woodblock prints that he'd been collecting in Paris, and every choice is intentional. Van Gogh wasn't painting what he saw, he was expressing what he felt. And that is our fourth habit, the fourth core habit, expressing. Using everything available to you to share what you know and what you experienced. What happened next is one of the most famous episodes in art history. Gauguin arrived. Their temperaments clashed. Within 2 months, Van Gogh suffered a breakdown, cut off his own ear. You can't tell a crazier story, and yet that is what happened. He painted 2 more versions of the bedroom, one from an asylum in St. Remy, one as a gift for his mother and sister. The same story told 3 times, each time from a different place in his life. Because Van Gogh was expressing what he felt. Van Gogh once wrote that there is nothing more truly artistic than to love people. His art wasn't technique for its own sake, it was an attempt to express something true. In just 10 years of painting, he'd created over 900 paintings and 1,100 drawings. And when he was done, he described his own legacy as very secondary. But the world disagreed. And so, we study him today. In Challenge 2, your students will encounter a similar question about identity and expression when they read Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. The caterpillar asks Alice, "Who are you?" And Alice, having changed sizes so many times, can hardly answer. They also study Marvelous to Behold and explore how artists across centuries express ideas about God, humanity, beauty, and being. Van Gogh belongs in that conversation. Italy, Austria, Hungary, Czechia, and Slovakia. Your student is mapping Central European countries. And here's one more habit at work. The foundation of everything else is simply knowing where things are. Naming place, attending, building. A mental map. Every future lesson in history or otherwise can actually be found on. You see, every discussion, whether cultural or political, depends on having a frame of reference, and just knowing the names of the places and where they are helps to begin to color that conversation. The Austro-Hungarian Empire once connected these nations. World War I dismantled it, World War II reshaped the borders, the Cold War divided them again, in 1993 Czechoslovakia peacefully split into two countries. You see, geography shapes history. History reshapes geography, and knowing where places are is our first step in understanding. And I think, at least for me, understanding is one of the goals. So here's what I'm hoping that you take away from week 18. Your student is naming physics laws, noun cases, countries on a map. They're attending. They're noticing how the third law differs from the first law, how a direct object is different from an indirect object. They're memorizing formulas, vocabulary, history sentences. Those are all becoming scaffolding for everything that comes next. This isn't just memory work. These are the 15 skills of classical tradition, the 5 core habits of grammar that become the foundation for the 5 common topics of dialectic and the 5 canons of rhetoric. Van Gogh spent his whole life developing these habits before copying, sketching, studying. Before you ever saw Starry Night, he had applied himself for hours on end, memorizing, attending. And so, if you are to be a storyteller, like the great storyteller, you have to put in the work at the front, memorizing, naming, attending, expressing. So, that wraps up everything that I was thinking this week, and I hope it spurred some thoughts for you as you lead your family in Foundations this week. If you found this helpful, share it with a friend, comment, like, subscribe. But remember, learning is a lifestyle, so be an everyday educator.